Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Daniela and on this channel we make crafts and cocktails. Super excited about today because it's in collaboration with my friend Megan from the Crafty Quinn, and I am doing Nightmare Before Christmas themed DIYs. These are some of my favorite ones I've made yet. So let's jump right in and then we will share what today's cocktail is. Cheers! This first DIY was inspired by an Instagram crafter named XOXO Shell. I'll leave her Instagram link down below, but it's basically this little haunted house with all of the Nightmare Before Christmas characters in it. So I'm starting out by just loosely painting my wood cut out from Dollar Tree with just black acrylic paint from Plaid. You can pick this up at Walmart or really anywhere. So anyways, I'm just putting it down, and I kind of like that kind of streaky look. It makes the house look a little bit more, I don't know, antique or worn down or realistic, something like that. So I just loosely paint the front and the back, and then I make sure to paint the bottom edges nicely covered completely. So the bottom I did not leave with any sort of wood streaks poking through. I completely covered it with black paint as well as all of the edges around it. I printed out just on a regular old printer paper, all of the characters from Nightmare Before Christmas, and I'm just cutting them out. So I really like these graphics that I found, but it didn't have every character on it. So I went out of my way to also find a picture of that little like announcer guy who has the two different faces and really worries a lot, as well as Oogie Boogie, because you gotta have Oogie Boogie in there, right? So anyways, I'm just cutting these out because these are going to be in the little windows of our little haunted house. So you can do this honestly with any movie or any sort of Halloween characters or whatnot. I think XOXO Shell did one with, maybe Mickey Mouse characters and then another movie. I can't remember, to be honest with you. But you could do this with any sort of movie. I think it's a great idea. I just chose Nightmare Before Christmas because it goes with my theme. I am using some spray glue to adhere them to the back of my haunted house so that they poke through. This was a little bit tricky because some of them I cut a little too small to fit, so I end up having to add a few different little extra pieces on the sides of some of my characters because otherwise a lot of sunlight was showing through. So just be aware of that for sure if you try this DIY, to cut them to the correct size. And I'm also like constantly checking the front and the back to make sure that you can actually see the characters and that their face isn't half cut off and whatnot. So then I just follow up with a brush to spread a little bit of that glue around and to also water down a little bit of the glue, because I've used spray glue before and it tends to, at least this spray glue tends to stay a little tacky. So I watered it down and then wiped it off with a baby wipe, and that's about it for this DIY. Super simple. This is a great beginner's DIY, and you get a sneak peek there at my next one. But here's our cool little haunted house with all of our Nightmare Before Christmas characters in it. Let me know what you think about this one in the comments down below. I'm Daniela S. Pumpkins. Any questions? I know what you really want to know is, where did I get these sunglasses that say boo? I made them. I'll leave the link down below. And what's today's cocktail? Let's jump right in and find out. That one's for you, Megan. Today's cocktail is incredibly simple. It's one of my friend Katie's favorite go-to, and it's just a whiskey ginger ale. But we are making it fall by getting apple whiskey. So I am only just going to pour in about a shot's worth of apple whiskey. I've got Jim Beam here, but you can use your favorite whiskey of choice. And then just topping it off with some ginger ale. This is literally so simple that it took me 35 seconds to make. That's how easy it is. And to be honest, it tastes like apple juice. Like the ginger ale goes away, the whiskey flavor goes away. It just tastes like plain old apple juice. It was honestly magical. But anyways, highly recommend, and cheers. Moving on to our next DIY, which is this hand-painted scene from the Nightmare Before Christmas on an oven burner. So Dollar Tree sells these 2-packs of oven burner covers, and I'm showing you there which colors I'm using, of course, from Plaid Crafts. I'm a Plaid ambassador, so I will leave their link below as well, but they have awesome crafting paints. I'm using a tub of acrylic paint to just create a circle in the center of my oven burner cover. And I'm just going to paint it with white. And I'm doing this first because I know that those words will poke through, and I need to get a layer down. Yes, I did. I was smart, and I remembered to sand it down a bit because sometimes the paint doesn't want to adhere to super shiny surfaces. So I sanded it down really quickly, nothing major, and then just covered the moon area with white paint because, again, I knew that those words would show through, and it took a few layers. So just covering it with regular acrylic white crafting paint, and then I'm going to go with around the outside of the moon area with just black paint to start. We are going to create this really cool dimensional cloudy night sky effect in just a minute here, but we're just starting with regular old black craft paint and going to cover that entire outer area with black paint. And oh, got smart again. I put down a sheet so that my table wouldn't get super messy. And this is just a chunk of a drop cloth from Dollar Tree, which again, super cheap, super affordable, easy peasy. And yeah, so I'm just covering this area with the black craft paint, like I said, and being very, very careful around the edges of the moon because black is very hard to cover up. So I know that if I accidentally overlap that, it's gonna be heck and a half to try to cover that up. So I did make sure to use my heat gun in between each layer, which is what I'm grabbing now. And this really helped quicken up the drying process and make this so much faster. I will say this is probably more of an advanced DIY as opposed to the first one that was super beginner because it does take a lot of hand painting and patience. So if you're interested in painting, totally a great DIY for you. Next, I'm going in with a brush that was a little bit more frayed because I want to stipple. Stippling means that you've got kind of this like, I don't know, these spread out bristles and you're just poking your base. So in this case, my base is the oven burner. I'm going in with my darker purple paint and I'm just stippling, again, which is basically just like poking, pouncing, whatever you want to call it, all around my burner. And I try to create areas where in some places it's lighter, in some places it's darker, because I really like the idea of creating a lot of dimension with this look. Now, I could have started with purple paint, if that's a question that you have, but it wouldn't have gotten the depth that it needed without that black background. And the reason that we're covering up the black background is because we do want the sky to pop out for one, but also for that little like curly Q mountain that they are standing on to pop out as well with the black paint. If we have black paint on black paint, you won't be able to see it. So as you can see here, I'm going in with my lighter purple now and doing the same thing, just stippling. I didn't even rinse my brush because I thought it would help blend it a little better. And I'm just stippling around. And for this one, I'm not necessarily going everywhere. I'm being a little bit more intentional in that it's a little bit more of like a, I don't know, like a foggy look, right? So it's in clouds. It's just in different formations. It's not just everywhere because this again helps create that depth and dimension that we want for our painting. And as you can see here, it's really creating this really cool sky atmosphere. It's important to go from dark to light in this instance so that you really get those layers in the right order. Here I'm just going back in with a little bit of the dark purple to blend in some of those areas so they're not too stark. Now I'm going in again. I let that dry. Don't get me wrong, I know that this looks quick, but you have to make sure each layer dries so that you don't get smudges. I would have gotten smudges of purple in my moon otherwise, and that would not have been cool. So anyways, I'm going in with some yellow and white acrylic paint and just painting a layer of my moon to be this pastel yellow color. Now, it doesn't look like it here, but once it dried, and I'm using my heat gun again, by the way, I'll have that linked in my description box below in case you want one. Super easy, just ships right off Amazon. But the words do come out again. Like I said, I know you can't see here, but they do. So I have to do a second layer, and I even made my second layer a little bit lighter because I felt like my moon was a little bit yellow. If you don't know, my goodness, my raspy morning voice. As I was saying, if you don't know, acrylic paints do dry and become about 1 to 2 shades darker once they're dried. So mix the color you want, also knowing that it will dry a shade darker. So I went in with some white paint to create a bit of a highlight on the upper right-hand corner, or if there's a corner, of my moon. And then I mixed in a teeny tiny bit of this burgundy color into my yellow to create like a yummy orange, yellow, ochre color on the bottom left area-ish. And that creates a lot of dimension in our moon, makes it look more spherical and realistic. So that's why I added that. Again, once it was dry, the important part about painting is making sure your layers are dry. I'm taking a smaller round brush, and I actually end up going into an even smaller brush to get some of the details. And I'm making this big swirl for that mountain. Now, if you've seen The Nightmare Before Christmas, this is a big scene where Jack and Sally are sitting on top of the mountain and connecting, blah, blah, blah. There's also a lot of art that looks like this, too. So I'm just making my swirl and filling it in as much as possible. I really want this to be professional looking, and honestly, it does. Like, when I look at it now, I'm like, holy crap, I made that. So I'm filling in all of my areas with that black paint, making it nice and smooth and even so it looks like it's not too wonky. And then I go in with some highlights. Now this part, I didn't quite wait till it was dry yet, but that's okay because I wanted it to blend in a bit. So I'm using a tiny brush and a little bit of white paint to create some highlights, just some, essentially just little lines around the edges. And then I created a little bit of like blended white area in the middle of my mountain too, if you can see it there. But again, just adds a lot to the piece, creating that highlight and just, again, creates a foreground, middle ground, background, gives you dimension, which is exactly what you want in a painting. Now I'm creating my little people with a Sharpie, and I thought that this would work well, but to be honest, my Sharpie was not, I don't know, I didn't want to play nice with the paint, and there was a lot of like little smudgy marks. I know you can't see it here necessarily, but up close and in real life, you could tell that this was made with a marker, and you could tell that it was just not working well. So I used this as a base, which I think was still a smart idea, because I think if I would have gone in straight with paint, there would have been greater chance of error. So I still recommend this. Dry your little people out with your Sharpie marker. You can use a regular one or a fine tip, and I'm looking at a picture to base it off of on my phone here. But then, like I said, you can't see it on here, but truly in real life, you could tell that there is just not black and solid. So I go in with a teeny tiny little brush and some black paint and just fill in the characters, and it really helped the piece come together. So I would definitely recommend doing that. If you have some sort of exceptional Sharpie marker, great. Leave it at that. You don't have to do this part, I mean. But for me at least, it really helped increase the quality of the painting. Now to add a final touch, I'm adding some stars. Super duper easy. You just take a small brush and you just make these little lines. You start in the center, and this is the order I go in. I make a little streak going up, then my one's going to the side, left, right, and then one going downwards. Now, this is one of those things where it's like when you're up close, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm screwing up. This doesn't look even, blah, blah, blah. But then from far away, it looks amazing. And really, truly, it adds so much to this piece to have that extra detail. So if you don't feel comfortable making these little lines, you could just use the back of your brush and just put little polka dots everywhere and dip it in the white paint to create those polka dots, and it'll look like stars just as much. But I really like making these little like ninja star type of things because I just think it adds so much to the piece. And that's it. Here it is displayed on my end table and next to the haunted house again. I really, really love how this turned out, and it looks super, super professional. Like I said, this video is in collaboration with my friend Megan from the Crafty Quinn. I'll leave her link below and her video, so make sure you check her out. She is an amazing crafter and one of my first friends on YouTube, so I'm super grateful for her. Last but not least, we have this more simple and subtle. This is Halloween sign. I know that the words aren't coming through as much in the picture, but it really looks really cool in person. I got this sign at the Dollar Tree with a little pumpkin on top already carved out, which was really cool. And I'm just sanding down the top and bottom edges because they were a little bit fried. And it did come with a piece of jute to hang it, but I thought I didn't really want to hang it at this point. And so I'm just filling in those little holes with some spackle. And they do sell spackle at some Dollar Trees. I personally have not found it at my Dollar Tree, so this one is just from Lowe's. I did let it dry before I sanded it down, which you don't quite see here. You see me just putting on some paint right away, and then I panicked and was like, oh yeah, I have to sand down the holes. So while I was waiting for dry, I did create a graphic on my Cricut design space, and then cut it out on my Cricut Explorer. And what you can't see here is I'm just sanding down those little edges. I am not an expert at spackling stuff, okay? So in real life, or in, I guess, up front and up close, you can kind of see that the holes are still there, but whatever. So I just used black paint and a baby wipe, and I dipped my baby wipe in a teeny tiny bit of water to create this cool, like, almost faded black wood grain look, which I absolutely loved, and it was definitely the look I was going for. You could make this sign with any color, but I knew that I wanted it to be darker so that the letters would really pop. So I'm making sure to make sure it's nice and dark, as well as getting all of the edges and my little spackle points that kept wanting to poke through as white like the spackle. But I did my best to really cover them up. And then I did the back. I usually don't do the back of things because I'm lazy. But you know what? I really wanted this to look professional, so I said, screw it. I'm just going to do it, even if it's just, not as well done as the front. At least it will look like a complete professional piece. So I just really quickly did the back, and then came around and make sure that pumpkin had black on the inner edges as well. Now, this is the graphic I made with my Cricut. It says this is Halloween. So this is in like a really funky font, because I thought it would be fun for them to be in different fonts. And I'm just carefully placing all of my pieces. I do not have a 12 by 24 inch cutting mat, which is what this would have liked to been cut on. So I had to make sure I did it in chunks on a 12 by 12 inch piece mat. If you are interested in this graphic, I am happy to email it to you for a small fee. Just let me know. Now, although I'm doing this on a very small sign, I think this would be so cool as those like huge wood, what are they called? Like, I don't know, just leaning pieces of wood on somebody's front porch where they're like 6 feet tall. I think that would look super cool. And that's kind of the idea I was going with here. But unfortunately, I just had this small piece. And also, I don't really have a porch, so it wouldn't make sense anyways. So I'm just placing down my stencil, and then I'm going in with a sponge brush and some light as well as dark orange paint, because I didn't have an orange that I liked. I wanted it to be a really medium orange, and I only had light or like really dark orange. Not necessarily dark, but really, I don't know, orange. And so I just mixed them together with my sponge brush, and I sponged these on. It's really important that you do not use a brush during this part. The sponge will allow it to get onto the stencil just the way it needs to. If you use a brush, you risk getting it underneath the stencil. So you'll have all sorts of smudges and little like bubbles and all that. So really important to use a sponge. What you don't see on camera here is that I did this 3 times. So I did not just do 1 layer, I did 3 layers because I wanted to make sure that the orange was really going to show through. And here you can see up close that the words, this is, are really quite prominent. It doesn't look like that in the picture, but I promise you it looks really good in real life. So here's a true testament to how that looks and how wonderful and bright it is. I am slowly peeling away my vinyl stencil that I made, and unfortunately, for some reason, the left side really kept peeling up the wood or whatever this material is, but the little like wood shavings, which you can see here. And so I did end up having to go back and smudge a little bit more of a baby wipe and some black paint on there to cover that up, because I didn't want that to be so, gosh, I don't know, just so blatant that it's clear that it was just peeled right up. So just be aware of that. If you choose to make this project, that might happen. And I did wait for my background to be dry before I did the stencil and all that, but my stencil must have just been really sticky in that it wanted to peel up the wood pieces, I guess. Now this part's really cool. I intentionally did not make, or I shouldn't say did not make, but I peeled up all those pieces inside the O because I wanted to put Oogie Boogie in there. I felt like I didn't put Oogie Boogie enough in my DIYs, so I made a teeny tiny stencil of him just from a Google image, and then put him on my Cricut design space, and peeled up the areas that I knew I wanted to paint. So I have Oogie Boogie inside of the O of Halloween, and I'm just using some bright green paint. Again, these are just plaid craft paints that you can pick up at Walmart for, I don't know, $1, less than $1, I'm not sure. And I'm taking a super tiny little sponge piece and sponging on my green paint. Now, you don't have to add this part if you just want the regular, this is Halloween, but I thought that it would add the extra touch so people know it's a direct Nightmare Before Christmas reference. And again, I just felt like I needed more Oogie Boogie in these DIYs. So that's my nod to Oogie Boogie. And again, super satisfying being able to peel up these pieces. Something I didn't mention earlier is you do want to peel up the stencils while the paint is wet. And that's because if you wait for it to dry, it might peel up part of the paint along with the stencil. So you want to peel it up while it's wet. Now, the little teeny tiny eyes of Oogie Boogie did not quite stick, and that's fine. I thought about adding them in, but to be honest, I kind of like the simplicity of just Oogie Boogie's silhouette and his smile. I thought it got the point across, didn't need his eyes. Here, as you can see, I'm going in and fixing up the areas that were peeled up from the vinyl stencil. Again, with just a baby wipe and some black paint. Super easy peasy. The only thing I would recommend is to make sure that you're really spreading it out and not just going in those little tiny areas, because then it will be very blatant that you fixed it up as opposed to like kind of smudging and easing it out into the rest of the board. To finish this off, I got these cool lime green Dollar Tree spiders that match perfectly with my Oogie Boogie, and I just happen to have these on hand. I actually didn't buy them for this reason, but they perfectly match that green. And so I am hot gluing one spider on the top of my sign, and I'm going to glue one spider on the bottom of my sign. These were a little bit tricky because it was difficult figuring out which points would actually touch the board and where to hot glue. So I just recommend going in and reinforcing the areas that are touching to make sure he's not just going to flop off. And as always, if you want this to be a longer hold, you could just use E6000 glue. I wanted mine to stick right away. I'm a lover of instant gratification, so I just use hot glue. Now I'm using a small brush and some white paint, and I'm just creating these little stitches all the way down my board. I played with the idea of doing like an Oogie Boogie stitch where it's like wavy with the stitches, and I didn't like that, so I wiped it off. But I just did these little tiny white stitches, which was actually recommended by my boyfriend. He doesn't always have recommendations when I have questions during my DIYs and what it needs, but this was an awesome suggestion, and I'm really grateful for that. So I really thought this would tie it all together. It kind of adds that extra oomph that it needed. It just felt too plain without it. And it kind of goes along with the thought that, Oogie Boogie was made of a bunch of, little sewn pieces of fabric. So in a sense, it also represents that, which I love. Painting the stitches on is the final step of this DIY, and again, this is a more subtle nod at the movie, but I think it'll be fun for some people who have more of a farmhouse style or not as eclectic as some of my other DIYs. So here you can see it pictured on the ground and also on the wall, and how it could look great as either one. I hope you enjoyed today's DIYs. Go check out my friend Megan the Crafty Quinn, and I'll see you next time. Bye!